The first point that happens is you need to identify people who could be your leaders in the future. Once you identified them is when it's all about development and making sure they get the right experiences, the skills are getting built, they are getting exposure to senior leadership, they are getting coached. All of that comes through. But the first step is always about identification. How many of you have heard about Signify? So we are the largest source of light on Earth after the sun. We are the world leader in lighting. So I'll talk to you about a journey that we started around 2014 up until now. And what was the implication from a leadership, talent, succession, capability building perspective during this journey. So Signify, if I have to talk about, is basically, we started in 1891. Philips started operating as a light bulb manufacturing company, and that's who we are. In 2014, they decided to divest the lighting business. And in 2018, that was last year, is when we renamed ourselves as Signify. So that's a bit of a history, hence the question and relation to Philips. Now we are no longer a part of Philips. It's a completely standalone organization listed on the stock exchange. So the whole divestment is done. And the whole transformation is never done, right? Transformation is always a journey, but we've had our first step of transformation. So what's this all about, right? If we look at the world and we took a macro picture, then the population growth and urbanization is happening in a rapid pace. The world is battling with resource challenges and with digitization, as a lot of companies are now talking about. But that has interesting implications for us as an industry because there's more demand for light. And not just light, there's more demand for energy efficient lighting, so from lamps to LEDs, but also towards connected lighting and digital lighting, where light today can do a lot more than just illuminate. So lighting has basically gone beyond illumination. Companies are using lighting for space utilization, space optimization, asset tracking. Light is now being used in pilot phases for providing internet. So instead of Wi-Fi, you could use Li-Fi, where internet comes from light waves and not radio waves. So there's a lot of new technology that's coming in lighting. And why am I talking about all of this? Is it has a huge implication on how your business is structured and what are the implications from a skill set, leadership, and talent perspective on all of this. Because you would not need the same capabilities that you needed 10 years back when it was all about hardware. But if it's becoming a lot more about software and connected lighting, then what capabilities as an organization you need in your workforce is completely different. So for us, the challenge was two. One, we had to become a standalone organization after Philips decided to split us, and that has its own challenges. The second was the industry was transforming at a rapid pace, and we need to make sure that we are transforming and building those capabilities for our business and maintain industry leadership. Because when you are the leaders in the industry, then everyone looks up to you to say, okay, what's next? What's the new technology? What's coming up next? And that's again a challenge. So how do we look at all of that? So our three key focus areas were, one, to look at what does leadership really mean in the context of the new reality when we are going standalone? Because when you are part of a group, the leadership requirements are a bit different when you are a completely standalone company and you're not shielded from a group perspective. Because then you need your leaders to have effective discussions with the boardroom. You need your leaders to have effective discussions with the media, investor relations, public. So, a completely new ballgame from leadership emerges. Another thing was, how do you build capabilities in digital and connected space? Because that's where the future of lighting is going to be. How can you sell lighting as a service and not lighting as a product? And the third focus area, which is more an HR focus area, was you are changing your brand name. And just as a poll, we know that, we are still, our employer brand is not out there. 2 people knew about Signify. That is a big challenge for us, and that's going to be a big focus for us over the next coming years, to say, how do you really build your employer brand when, as products, we are still going to sell products named Philips because we have a licensing agreement with Philips to use the brand name for some more time. But for employees, they don't work for Philips, they work for Signify. Right? So, and how do you really attract that talent in the digital space who can go and join a Netflix or an Uber, but instead decides to come and work for Signify? So that's also another challenge. Today, I'll not talk about all of that because then it becomes a really long and boring topic for most of you. But I'll basically touch about these three things, which is about defining our new leadership requirements, what is our assessment of top leadership, and a 3-tiered approach for leadership and talent. So that's what I will basically talk about. So when you go standalone, we partnered with an external vendor because when you are not the experts, it's best to use the experts and define when companies who go through this kind of transformation, what is it that they really look for from a leadership perspective. So you come up with the really well-defined leadership capabilities that are needed. And when I say leadership, it's basically the top 200 leaders in the organization. Have a thorough assessment of them to say who are the ones who are going to make it in the new organization, who are the ones who won't. And then you really work on, can we develop? Do we need to buy? Do we need to build? And a lot of times, initially, when you're going and splitting, you don't have the time to build. It's important to go and buy that talent. So in 2015, if I look at our hiring numbers for leaders, more than 70% of our leadership hiring was external because we had to build, we had to buy, and make sure that the pipeline is there. And then over 2015 to now, more than 70% of our leadership appointments are internal. And they are internal, and that's a big shift. So 70% external to 70% internal over a period of 4 or 5 years has made happen because of the constant focus from our CEO and the board of management and the leadership team to really talk about identify talents, make sure we are developing them. That's where the leadership development programs come in. That's where stretch assignments, action learning, stretching people comes in. And make sure when the job comes up, even if they are not 100% ready, are we going to take the risk and give the jobs to them? And yes, we've seen that happen over the last 2 years because, even when you go external, and we still do close to 25-30% of our hiring for leadership positions externally, it's not that everyone is successful from day one. They will also take time to start understanding your organization, understanding the matrix, ability to perform. But people who come from internal, they need to understand certain other things to develop. But they understand your organization, they understand your products, they understand the matrix. So there's always a trade-off between internal and external. For our succession, and that's where it gets linked to how did we move from so much external to so much internal. It's all about making sure in 2015 was all about having the right leadership bench. Do we have people who are fit in the role? And then every year you do something else, right? In the spirit of continuous improvement, 2016, do we have now successors for them? Do we have at least one ready now successor for the top 2 layers in the organization, which cover close to 500 positions? Then 2017, you go deeper and you say, okay, now do we have successors who are still farther away, right? Ready after current role, 1 or 2 jobs away, or ready after next role? And how can we make sure that we are building them and bringing them up? Because the first point that happens is you need to identify people who could be your leaders in the future. Once you identified them is when it's all about development and making sure they get the right experiences, the skills are getting built, they are getting exposure to senior leadership, they are getting coached. All of that comes through. But the first step is always about identification. 2018, we said, okay, it's a matrix organization. People have done a great job about looking at people from within. Can we have more cross-business, market, functional kind of a successor pool coming in? Great. And 2019, let's look at diversity of our plans. Right? Could we have done everything in 2016? Probably yes, but then the focus would have been too diluted. Right? So every year, you build on something. So last year, we said, okay, diversity in leadership is the challenge. That was a challenge before as well. But before, what was important was to make sure we fix the leadership. And now we look at diversity. And also to increase diversity, let's make sure we have racial diversity, ethnicity coming up in our succession plans. If they come up on your succession plans is when you know, yes, you have a right pool of people who can become future leaders. So that's how we looked at approaching the whole talent management leadership piece on this. Another aspect that I would like to maybe touch about in the next 4-5 minutes is about capability building for future, right? So we talked about digital, we talk about connected lighting. What does that mean? We said you can do everything for everybody, or you can go really selected and focused and say, let's identify critical jobs that are going to be important for us in the future, where innovation is going to be one of the big differentiator for us as an organization. So R&D, definitely a critical area for us. Another critical area for us was in sales, but a very small segment of sales, which was, we call them end user sales, but that's basically people who are not selling products, but people who are selling systems, solutions, services. So that's a very small group of people, but how do you build them, and how do you make sure either you hire them or you train them from within? And that was one another area that we picked up for our organization to really focus during this time. And then linked to that comes your marketing. So we identified some key capability areas where we want to make a difference, and that will actually help our strategy in the future to help us execute our strategy. For each one of them, after you identify, it's just normal process. You make sure the competencies are defined, you make sure we are assessing them. There was a quarterly rhythm to start with on assessment, so that's not easy. That creates a lot of pressure on the organization, but you're doing it for a very small group. And quarter on quarter, you're seeing how's that group doing in terms of capability building. It was completely not linked to performance assessment. It was all about capability building. Do we have the right learning programs for this small group of people? Now we are, just to give you an indication, we are close to 28,000 in terms of employee strength. And when I talk about this small group of people, this is around 3,000 people. So it's a very small group. It's around 10% of the organization for which this effort is going in. And then you follow up and progress per quarter, as I mentioned. So this was a very, very focused intervention. We still run it. Now we've moved from a quarterly assessment to an annual assessment from this year onwards, because we saw the rhythm coming in, learning programs happening, development support getting in, and we also saw the percentage of overall qualified people in this target group going up. So with that, the focus is now moving more towards development and giving them the right experiences. The leaders during this time have understood what exactly is needed, but in the beginning you need to have that constant rhythm. So as I mentioned, it was about 20% was about assessing the gap and 80% was about closing them. So with that, I would like to share some of the key learnings also that we had during this transformation. I think one was, during the time of transformation, it's important, or also the split, it's important that our people understood why is Philips gonna divest lighting. So that was really important. And for that, we went with town halls, we went with leadership, we went with the full story of what does that mean for us. It will make us faster, it will make us agile as an organization, because decision making is one level down. You can decide where you want to invest for the organization. We always start from the top, from be it leadership assessments, be it capability building, everything started from the top. We over communicated during this time because people say, okay, communication is important. I think communication can never be less in this age. The more you communicate, the more is better. Making choices, as I mentioned, go really focused during transformation, because it's good. Do you want to make everyone happy, or do you want to really go focused? I think we went focused and we made deliberate choices during this time. And keep investing in people, because from our leadership programs or other development programs, in the end, it's all about the people who will make sure the technology is there, who will make sure the company is selling the products. So it's all about the people. When I talk about employer brand, so we've been participating in a lot of in Great Place to Work, for example, which helps us strengthen our employer brand. As you would see, in some places it calls out Signify, in some places it still calls out Philips Lighting, because different countries, there was a different time when you could really move and change your name. But this is a proof that everything that we do, we are doing it in the right way. There's more to come, but that's what I wanted to really share with this group on how we approached, how we are doing things. And that's all.
Thank you very much. A good presentation. I like the capability building part, and I'm super interested in the assessment part in the middle. But if I recall correctly, was you defined the relevant capabilities, and then there was like assess.
Yes.
How have you done? Was it an internal assessment? And you wrote assess people, but can you share more details?
So that has also evolved over the last 3 or 4 years. Initially, we started with offline assessments where it was only a manager-led assessment. So for example, if I have to assess someone in my team, I would assess them on those 4 technical and 4 behavioral competencies that are identified. But in 2017 is when we moved everything into Workday. So Workday is our platform that we use for HR. We moved everything into Workday, where what we also incorporated was employee assessment. So as an employee, you self-assess yourself on those 8 competencies, which means you know what those 8 competencies are which are needed for your job, 4 technical and 4 behavioral. It goes on to the manager assessment. The manager assesses it, submits it in the system, and everything, all the report comes out of the system. We don't use an external provider. The competencies were created using our SMEs from the different functional areas. So for example, if it is sales, then we use the commercial excellence team to help us, along with my team, define which are those competencies, get it validated by the commercial board, and have that assessment. They are also followed up by a calibration. I know a lot of companies don't use calibration. We still use calibration, where we basically see what are those competencies, what are some of the trigger points that would define are the people displaying those competencies or not. So the managers, when they come for those meetings, have to basically defend why they are rating someone as, at a certain level of qualification in that competency, and what are the behaviors that the person is displaying. And then we basically discuss a lot on the outliers and not so much on the people who are there. This happens. Also, it's important to know when does the process really happen. It happens right before our mid-year conversation. So mid-year for us is focused around development, and this happens before mid-year. So everything flows into the mid-year, where basically then the discussion with the manager and the employee is more around, if this is the gap on the competency set, then what are the development offerings that you can use? And it flows naturally then into the mid-year discussion.
Thank you.
Hello, this is Bianca. I am really curious to know, I guess in Signify you incorporated technology as a really big part of your business compared to Philips. How did you manage to incorporate technology also in succession plan, and which challenges did you face? As technology is evolving so fast, at least as we are having some trouble now in taking into account that fast evolution in succession plan.
Yeah. So I think the key differentiator for that is, as you rightly said, because the technology is evolving so fast, we looked at people who have that kind of a learning agility is how we define potential, right? So if people have high learning agility, and if they have that affinity to technology, because if I take a step back and we talk about digital leaders, it's not that all of them need to be masters in coding and technology, but do you have an affinity to technology, and can you understand technology, and what implications does that technology have for your business? And that's really important. So when we talk about succession, that's what we bring forward, that can this person really understand how the industry is going to move? And what implications will that have for him or her business? Right? So that's where it comes. A technology for an R&D leader versus a technology for a sales leader is completely different understanding. So you have to go with that lens. So I would not use one approach for everybody, but really differentiate by what is the role of the person.